Evening, everyone. Our goal has been to try to get every student whose family wants them to back in school by March 1st. We have learned that some kids have really not done very well remotely. And some kids, particularly in our urban schools, have been out of school for now almost a year. It's time to get them back in school. We have seen some of the consequences and heard some of the consequences of children not being in school, social consequences, mental health consequences, academic consequences. We saw that in some of the testing that has been done recently. In this last almost a year, we've learned a great deal about keeping schools safe. And we've learned that masks really work, even in a classroom when kids are less than 6 feet together. Superintendents have told us this, principals for some time. We went in and actually did testing in Ohio, in schools, and that was confirmed. And that child was in the classroom, everyone wearing a mask. The spread is very, very little. We also now have national data, which indicates the same thing. And recently the CDC has come forward and said it's safe to go back to school even with the personnel not having a vaccine. But we said to our teachers, our school districts, and all the personnel that we would take some of the precious vaccine and vaccinate teachers, custodians, cooks, anybody in the school, as long as that school said that we will be back in school no later than March 1st. We did that for the sole purpose of getting kids back in school. School districts promised to do this. We were very careful and very specific and very plain. And this is the document that they signed. I'm going to read a couple portions of it. For your adult school staff to be prioritized to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, you are required to return to in-person or hybrid learning model by March 1, 2021. The certification below certifies your commitment to do so, acknowledging that complete vaccine administration may not be completed by March 1st, 2021, and regardless of vaccine uptake by your staff. Later on it says, as the authorized, this is where it's signed by the school administrator. As the authorized representative of my school district, I represent our school district is committed to returning to in-person or hybrid learning by March 1, 2021. There's a place where that was signed. This was signed by every school district, public school district in the state of Ohio except one. Now, we have seen some really great progress even before March 1. Schools have by and large kept this commitment, and they've done even better. It's worked. Schools are keeping this promise. In December, 45% of our students were in fully remote schools. Today, that number is now less than 15%, and we're not even to March 1st. So I congratulate all the schools that have done this and thank them. The reason I'm here tonight, though, is we have learned that there are a handful of schools that have indicated that they will break that promise, that they will break that commitment. Not just a commitment to me, but really a commitment to the children of their district. This is simply not acceptable. And this is about the kids. Cincinnati school district. Superintendent called me, said, could we start a couple days early? Really want to get kids back in school. And I know she was very sincere in wanting to do that. I said, look, our whole objective is to get kids back in school. This helps you start with the K through 3, which is what she told me. I said, let's do it. And so we did that. We have now completed vaccination in Cincinnati Public Schools. However, we learned this week that Walnut Hills, one of the high schools, will remain remote the entire year. That simply is not acceptable. In Akron, again, everyone has been vaccinated in Akron. Anyone who wanted the vaccination in the school, and yet now we hear that they're not going to go back, we're told, until March 15th. That's not acceptable either. Cleveland. We have heard different reports about whether Cleveland would go back March 1st. So I called up the CEO, Eric Gordon. We had a frank, very plain, but a very good discussion. And frankly, I called him because we're in the midst now of vaccinating teachers, personnel in Cleveland City schools. And so my question to him was, are we to stop the vaccination? Should we stop the vaccination? And so we talked. He made a commitment to me. I'm very happy to report that he's going to do everything in his power to get his students back in school by March 1. We appreciate that. And I thank him for that. And I understand there's some challenges that he has, but he's going to make every effort. And I take him at his word. As I said, we had a very good discussion. This is really about our children. And it's about what we've learned in the last year. And what we've learned is that kids can be safe in school and are safe in school when everyone wears a mask and everyone follows protocol. And what we've seen in the last school year, this whole school year, is that schools have done this. Schools that have been in person, the schools have been hybrid. They've carried this out. Teachers have been wonderful. The kids have been great. Superintendents, principals, everyone has done the job. These schools are, in fact, safe inside that classroom. Parents have a right to make a decision whether to send their children back to school. That's been true all year. And parents, individual parents, have made that decision because they are the first teachers and they are the ones who should make those decisions. But what we're saying to the schools that look like they're starting to waver on this commitment, your commitment is not just to me. Your commitment is to your children in your school district, and your commitment is to those parents who have said, yes, I want to send my child back. I think that is in the best interest of the child. So this was important enough for me to take time tonight. I just had conversations about this, as I said, and I wanted to report to the people of the state of Ohio, and frankly wanted to appeal directly to the school boards, the families, school administrators. Your district signed this. You made a commitment to your kids. We expect you to fulfill that commitment. Thank you very much. More than happy to take questions.
Governor, first question this evening is from Andy Chow at Ohio Public Radio and Television.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Governor. Calling a press conference on a Friday night seems to sort of signal how important you find this. Do you also see this briefing that you're holding right now as sort of a warning shot to people that are still considering possibly not coming back on March 1st?
Yes. I mean, look, we just take people, throughout my life, I take people at their face value. When they tell me something, I believe it. And I'm very, very seldom am I disappointed. We're Ohioans. That's kind of what we do. This really came to a head today because, frankly, we're in the midst of vaccinating the personnel at Cleveland Public Schools. And I had to know whether or not they were still committed to going back to school, because as I expressed to the CEO, Mr. Gordon, I said, look, we'll just have to cut off the vaccinations, because that was the deal. That was the understanding. And it's not punitive. It's just that these vaccinations, if they're not going to get kids back in school when they need to be back in school, we need to take them and vaccinate other people, vaccinate people who are older. I mean, this was a major decision to pull some of these vaccines out, put them into our schools, but it's worth it if we can get our kids back in school and they can have 3 good months, March, April, May. And I tell you, I'm particularly concerned about our urban schools, where some of them have been out for the whole year. And it's not being critical. It's just simply saying it's time to get back in school. And these kids' lives are at stake, and we're impacting their futures. We're impacting where they are today, but we're impacting their future. It's time to get them back in school.
Next question is from Spencer Hickey at Hannah News Service.
Thank you. Governor, you opened by talking about how students have struggled with everything going on. There's been discussion in the legislature about waiving testing requirements for the 2020-2021 year. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's something, this is a legislative decision. I've had discussions with the Speaker and the Senate President. Look, I think it's good to know where everybody is, but I also don't think we should have consequences behind that. And that's where the governor comes down, at least. But this is a matter also certainly very much for the legislature.
Next question is from Jesse Ballard at the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Hello, Governor.
Jesse?
My question is, will you cut off vaccinations to schools that don't return by March 1? And will there be any repercussions for schools that maybe have already gotten those vaccinations?
Well, as I pointed out, in Akron, they've got the vaccinations already, for example. But in Cleveland, it's still going on. And, not trying to be punitive, but we just said, look, we can't, only reason we're doing this is so you go back to school March 1. That's kind of the deal. And we think it's worth it. But if you're not going to go back, then we need to take these vaccines and, frankly, put them to a group that is more vulnerable. It's not that we don't want to vaccinate teachers. We love teachers and we want to vaccinate them, but we're trying to accomplish things here. So, yeah, I mean, there's the consequence would be, is to pull back the vaccines. Now, in the case of the two of the schools I talked about, Walnut Hills and Akron, they've already been vaccinated. So we'd have to see what else we could do. But, what we want, frankly, the purpose of this is not to threaten anybody or punish anybody. The purpose is, let's get our kids back in school. Let's get this work out. Let's figure this out. Schools can do it.
Next question is from Jeremy Pelzer at cleveland.com.
Good evening, Governor. I wanted to remind you what you said in the past, that there wouldn't be sanctions or consequences. Urban school systems that have been fully remote, they have a much more complicated task in meeting this March 1st deadline. Isn't that a good faith effort enough?
Look, I'm not cutting off vaccines. I'm not asking the health department to cut off vaccines. The CEO told me he was making a good faith effort and would do the best he can. That's good enough for me.
Next question is from Trevor Peters at WXIX in Cincinnati.
And let me just add to that, kind of as a PS, I agree. A CEO or superintendent of a large urban school has many, many challenges, and starting back up is a challenge, tough job. So I understand. I understand that it is a tough job, but his commitment, and he's going to make every effort to do this, as I said, is good enough for me. When in other places, people are telling us, no, we're not going to do it at all, that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Governor, can you hear me?
I can. Yes. Thank you, Trevor.
What do you say to the teachers' unions who say it's not safe to go back to in-person learning until they've gotten immunity from the second shot? I mean, that's really the battle that, especially in Cincinnati, we're going through.
Look, I understand. CDC says it's safe. The testing we've done in schools in Ohio, where we've gone into some schools and we've literally tested where someone who is in a classroom closer than 6 feet, one person has the virus, exposes everybody around them, theoretically has exposed them, but everyone is wearing a mask. What we found time after time is there's not the exposure. And so we did that testing in Ohio. There's national testing that's been done that has shown the same thing. So we all looked at things differently last March, and we didn't know that much about the spread, and we certainly didn't know the power of the mask. We certainly didn't know that at all. So we just know a lot more today. So if that teacher was reluctant 4 months ago, I get it. But today, with the knowledge that we have, the testing that's been done, and just the experience we've had, where we've had a ton of kids back in school in Ohio, and they're spread, but it's not in that classroom. It is just not seeing much spread inside that classroom. So you add that, plus every single teacher will be vaccinated the first dose before they would go back. If you look at Akron, for example, the second dose comes for almost half the teachers in the last week in February, and then the rest of them in the first week in March. So, we know, and I'm not the doctor, and I'm not going to pretend I'm the doctor, but we know that there's significant immunity granted by the first vaccine. And the CDC is saying you don't even need a vaccine. So this is kind of added protection. And I think I understand reluctance, but I think when you look at all the facts coming together inside that classroom has proven, with people wearing masks, and now with the teacher having at least one shot of the vaccine, a very safe place.
Next question is from Jim Oddie at WHIO in Dayton.
Hey, Jim.
To be clear here, good evening. To be clear here, what is your message for those school districts who have gone back on their commitment to you? Could you perhaps still be looking at a redirection of outstanding vaccinations that are scheduled between now and March 1st? What's your message to them?
Well, if we know the school's not going to do that, sure, we would have no choice but to redirect them. I mean, if we had enough vaccine for everybody at this moment, we'd be vaccinating everybody. We don't. And anyone who's watched our press conferences and has gone back and forth in question and answer, everybody knows we just have a small amount of vaccine. It's very precious, and we're trying to apply it where we can save the most lives. We made the exception because we also think it's vitally important for our future, for this generation of our kids, to not lose any more time and to be able to get back into the classroom when their parents want them to do it, and back in that classroom, because they're falling behind. There's social consequences, there's mental health consequences. And so as we balance these things out, we said, look, it's worth it to take these vaccines if we can get the kids back in school. If we can't get the kids back in school, then we're not mad about it. I'm not mad about it. We're just going to say we're going to take these vaccines and put them over here with a group that is more vulnerable.
Next question is from Justin Dennis at MahoningMatters.com.
Good evening, Governor.
Justin.
This week, 2 health departments in the Mahoning Valley have temporarily stopped or restricted vaccine pre-registrations due to enormous demand. does it still appear as if the state will be able to deliver the vaccine to each of these districts? Is this plan for school vaccinations having an impact on availability for older Ohioans in the general population?
We've been very clear that, we now are getting about 200,000 first doses, and we are taking roughly 60,000 of that is going directly into our schools. We're going to do it for 4 weeks, no more, 4 weeks. And we believe that is worth it. That still leaves another 140,000 roughly vaccines. And, the vast majority of that is going to people based on their age, 65 and older. So we're doing two things at once. We can do it. When health departments run out, or when any pharmacy runs out, frankly, with the limited amount we have, we know they're going to run out. And when they run out, it simply means they got it in people's arms and they got the job done. And, for most of them, they'll get replenished the next week. They'll start all over again on Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday. They'll get it out, and this cycle continues to go forward. We believe that we're going to have more. We hope, when Johnson & Johnson comes online, we're going to have more vaccine, and we're going to be able to roll from there.
Next question is from Ashley Kirkland at WLWT in Cincinnati.
Hi, Governor. I have a couple of questions. Are you aware that Walnut Hill says the reason they can't come back in person is because of spacing? And if so, what's your answer to that?
Well, look, they signed the document. They signed to say they would go back in. If we were going to have that discussion should have taken place at that time. What our studies show is that if there's a 3-foot distance, that's what we tested. We tested in the schools when there was basically between a 3-foot and a 6-foot distance. So they didn't have that 6-foot separation, but had 3-foot and wore a mask. What we have found is that there's not very much spread. So, again, this is I understand. I talked to the superintendent. She and I had a very, very nice conversation, as we always have. And she explained, there's a real concern about the space at Walnut Hills. I would say that we, in putting this together, don't require full time. There are many schools that are doing hybrid. And so, I will never tell a school how to run the school, but some schools have done a hybrid where they're in 2 days and out 2 days, and they do something with the third day. But in other words, you're separating those students, and you're only having half those students in that building at a time. So I don't know all the facts about Walnut Hills. I know she told me it's a crowded situation. Kids are in close, but I would hope that they would have tried to work that out and figure out a way to do it. Again, we're not requiring even 5 days a week. We're simply saying back in school some.
Next question is from Susan Tebben at the Ohio Capitol Journal.
Hi, Governor. Can you explain why specifically March 1st, that deadline is so important, and what went into picking that date? And with some of these districts starting their vaccines as late as February 22nd, do you think it's realistic to believe that these vaccinations will be possible to finish starting that late in the month?
We are right on schedule. We knew it was going to take 4 weeks. It is going to take 4 weeks. We said at the beginning of this that everybody would have their first shot in the month of February. There would be some who would get their second shot in February, and everybody would be completed in the first few weeks in March. So we're consistent with that. We're right on schedule. As far as March 1st, look, there's nothing magical about this. It's just the cycle as we were moving forward. We want to give schools long enough time to get ready for this. And I don't remember the exact date, but it was with that in mind that we sent this to them, asked them if they wanted to sign it. Nobody compelled schools to do this. and they had a choice. If you want everyone to be vaccinated that wants the vaccination, then sign this, we'll vaccinate them, and you simply you're agreeing to come back to school and back in March 1. So it could have been a different date. It just seemed at the time, as we looked at what we knew and as we gained more and more knowledge about kids being in school with a mask on. And look, I have been very cautious about this. I've not throughout this, certainly not ever told parents what to do, nor really told schools. Schools have had choice all the way through, and they still have a choice. Schools can remain remote. Schools can go hybrid. They can do whatever they want to do. But we've evolved in what we know. And we know today so much more than we knew before. And what we know today is these schools are safe. We also know, and we continue to hear this, that we have some kids who really need to get back in the classroom, that this is hurting them socially, it's hurting them academically, emotionally, mental health-wise, and that they just need to get back in. And we want to provide that opportunity, not forcing them, but provide that opportunity for their parents. And I think they deserve that opportunity. These kids who have been out of school since March, now that we know that there's a way to do it safely in school, and now that we have the vaccine to add on top of that, it's really time to get the kids back in school.
Next question is from Tom Jackson at the Sandusky Register.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for taking my question. Governor, I've been getting emails from a 64-year-old in Erie County who's frustrated that he's not allowed to try to make an appointment and can't find out when he's going to be allowed to start trying to make an appointment. The school districts that don't follow the agreement to open by March 1st, are you going to consider delaying their second doses for a few weeks so you can get more first doses to people who are in more danger than a teacher who's in his or her 20s or his or her 30s?
I think there would be an ethical problem in delaying that, considering what the CDC has said. I think once we give that first vaccine, even if we find that the school violated what we asked them to do, I think we have a commitment, and we're going to live up to our commitment. And our commitment is to give that second dose. So until or unless the CDC and other medical experts tell us that it makes more sense to spread these doses out, we're not going to do that. We're going to follow the medical guidance as long as that is the medical guidance, and that's what we're going to do. And look, I understand the 54-year-old's frustration. I get it. People can disagree with what our priority is, but our basic priority has been to save lives, and we know that 65 and older is the most prime group. We also, we've not announced what we're going to do in the next phases, but we very well could go to 60 and 55 and 50. We know that above 50, you're dealing with, the vast majority, 96, 97% of the deaths that we've had. So we're going to continue to weigh these out and look at the different groups. We're always going to continue to weigh the vulnerability. But once teachers are vaccinated, we're pretty much, we've done health workers and teachers, and we're pretty much after that on one focus. And it's the same focus we've had all the way through, but it will be the exclusive focus at that point, and that is to save lives.
Next question is from Jordan Vanderberg at WEWS in Cleveland.
Good evening, Governor. Thank you for your time. I want to compliment Tom for asking the question that I was going to ask. So I will pivot to my second question, which is, if teachers and administrators know their students the best and they know what's best for their students, why are they wrong in not wanting to return to in-person learning on March 1st or by March 1st?
There's no requirement that any school go back in. I want to repeat that. We have not changed that. Throughout this entire school year, schools have had a choice to be remote. They could be hybrid. They could be all in person. All we have said is for the school district to think about it if you want everyone to get vaccinated, then we want you to agree to go back in school. They didn't have to do that. So this is a decision. This was a conscious decision that they made with a piece of paper that was very, very plain, a lot of communication about it. So we're not forcing anybody to go back into school. But we felt that if we, frankly, I thought if I offered this, it might entice some people to go back to school. It might give them more comfort and feel better about going back to school and give them some of that protection. And that decision was even made before the CDC came up with their recent statement that schools are safe even without vaccine. But this is an added layer on top of that if schools were willing to go back place. So the only real question is, don't take the vaccine if you're not going to go back in school, because the reason you're getting the vaccine and we're taking away from other people, the reason you're getting the vaccine is so kids can go to school.
Next question is from Anna Staver at the Columbus Dispatch.
Hi, Governor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. So Columbus says students in grades 6 through 12 aren't going back because they lack additional transportation. I wanted to ask, first of all, whether you've talked with Columbus City Schools, and second, whether there are any plans for any kind of statewide guidance or perhaps additional funding to address some of these issues in urban districts that don't exist elsewhere, like Walnut Hills, crowding, and Columbus busing.
So I didn't catch, Ann, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part. The purpose was, what was the problem in Columbus? I just didn't catch that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's no problem. They say they don't have enough buses to properly space the kids, which is why they aren't sending middle and high school back yet.
Yeah, I had not heard that. Something I'll certainly talk to the mayor about, but I don't know if we can be of any help. Obviously, if we can be of some help, we would want to do that, but I don't know the facts. So.
Next question is from Olivia Eugenio at WBNS in Columbus.
Evening.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I was muted. Olivia Eugenio, how widespread of a problem is this from school districts? Is it just the 3 districts that you specifically mentioned, or other districts as well? And is this really just a warning to others?
I'm not aware of other districts where it's a problem. I mean, again, look, as I said, I'm very happy. We've gone from, 40-some% totally remote in December to only 15% of the student population today totally remote. So look, we've already accomplished by this plan, I think, a great deal. We've got a lot of kids back in school. We're just looking at these 3 districts where, we see a problem and we feel that there might have been a problem. And so that's what we're doing. But no, I mean, overall, I think it's going very well.
Governor, next question is the last question this evening, and it belongs to Bryn Caswell of WKEF in Dayton.
Good evening, Governor. The Ohio Education Association says funding is needed to meet the CDC guidelines to get students back into the classroom. Is a lack of funding one of the reasons schools are pulling out of their commitment?
No, I don't think so. Schools will have to tell you that on an individual basis, but they have received significant money. I know it's been a great cost to them, and they've had, to erect barriers. They've done all kinds of different things, but I am not aware that is the problem. I've not been told that. I talked to several superintendents, as I told you today. No one is telling me that the money is a problem. We're not minimizing the cost, but no one is telling me that is the problem. So I'm not aware of that. Thank you all very much. Sorry to bring you out at night, but this is something we felt was important. I wanted to do it now. I thought it was very, very timely, and wanted to have, frankly, a frank discussion. So thank you very much.